Hey, I think we're live. So hello, anybody who may or may not be watching. So my name is Kent C. Dodds, and I'm here with Balazs. Is that I think I messed that up. What is your name again? Sorry.
Balazs, but that's fine. I was close enough.
Yeah. So Balazs just saw a video that I did, or a talk about code coverage with ES6 and Webpack. And asked for me to help out. So what do you need? How can I help you?
Yeah, so actually my original problem was that even though I cloned your repository and started to do the testing, the code coverage after I managed to enable it, that is always running 100%. And obviously it worked in your video, but it's actually not really working in my case.
Yeah, so I made a mistake, and I got all the code coverage working when I gave the talk, but I forgot to upload to commit and push the working version. And so what's the repo? And actually, let me just go to it really quick. It's github.com/kentcdod/random user coverage dashes random dash user dash coverage. And I totally forgot to push the branch that had the finished product. And on top of that, I in the video I didn't actually go through and totally finish or get everything working. So what would be most helpful for you? So are you stuck somewhere in particular and trying to implement it, or where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that would be pretty useful to do maybe a clone from the original repository and to walk through how to set up code coverage and actually make it working.
Okay.
And
how about we do this then?
Yeah, and actually I used partially your repository and then some other ones for my own project to set it up, and for me that would be also really helpful to see how to set up the code coverage with Webpack. So the code coverage we'll see inside the Webpack bundled structures.
Okay. Yeah. So what if we do this? What if I'll go ahead and clone this repo, and I'll set up test coverage, kind of like I did in my talk. But this time I'll actually commit the code and push it up so people can use it. And as I'm going through, you can interrupt me and ask any questions that you have.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Okay, cool. Let me share my screen. And here we go. You can see my screen?
Yep.
Is it big enough? Or actually, let me, I'll just make it ginormous. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, it's much better now, actually.
Great. So it's the random user coverage, and I'm just going to copy the git URL, and I'll git clone that, and then I'll go into random user coverage, and I'll open this up in WebStorm, get a feel of what the project looks like. Where did that go? Okay. So first thing that we'll do is run npm I or npm install, and that will get us all of our necessary dependencies. Let's take a look at our package JSON here. So we have a couple of scripts that we'll use. We have a start build, build prod, and test. these are all using, oh, this is using KCD Common Tools. I think this is actually already set up. If it's using KCD Common Tools, it's probably already set up to do code coverage. So what I'm going to do instead is I'll set up everything from scratch. So we'll create a new file called webpack.config.js and do module.exports our webpack config. And our let's see, we'll start out with our context. It's going to be actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add a new dependency. We'll install as a dev dependency path here. This is a really, really small micro library that I wrote that just makes getting paths a little easier. So we'll say var here equals require path here. And then my context is going to be in my source directory. And then my entry be relative to that is my index file. So that file there.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Like this path here, module, how different is that from the built-in path? So the built-in node path module.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. So we'll look at the implementation of path here. It's actually very, very simple. I just got tired of doing the same thing in several places. So all that it really does is, well, maybe it's not quite so simple here. So I'll just implement a very simple version of it. So we have a function, we'll call it here, one, whatever, and then a directory and then you have your built-in path. And all this does is it says return path.resolve dir name and dir or file. Has a couple of extra things on top of that, like it handles the case where dir or file is undefined. You can also specify some other root other than dir name. The default is just dir name. And then you can pass in like several layers deep as well. So like, or rather, so you can pass in as many directories as you want. So it's a really small library, but it can be handy. So that's why I prefer to just use it, because it's easier for me to just say here source directory rather than dir name.
Yep.
Because I can never remember, do I need a slash here or not? So that's what it's all about. Great. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, usually I just go with like path.join, and that really like solves the problem. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. Most of the time, path.join is fine, or resolve as well. Yeah. So okay. So then we're gonna have our output, and I think the plan is to have the output in the dist directory. So let's see. I think it's path name is here dist. Could be wrong on that. This is where I go to my GitHub lesson or my Egghead lesson to figure out how to do stuff that I should know. There we go. We go to this guy. So yeah, its output is file name and path. That's right. File name will be handle.js and path will be here in the dist. Okay, cool. So if I go to package.json and let's do a little more room for my build. Why am I doing this? I don't think that let's just build and we'll get rid of that guy. So for the production build, it's going to be Webpack, and I'm not going to pass a config because I'll just do the one that's in the root. Progress and colors is fine, and then we'll copy the source index to the dist. So let's hope that works. Just going to delete the dist directory. And we'll run npm run build.
By the way,
fails.
Yeah, by the way, just like a slight notice, I think CP is not working on Windows.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm not completely sure, but I think like CP that's not working in Windows.
Oh.
I mean, I'm using Mac right now, but
sorry. Well, right now I'm pretty sure the CP command will work, but that's not what's failing here. Yeah. What's failing is we don't have the Babel loader, so we need to. I'm pretty sure we have that already installed right here. We need to add it to our configuration. So go. Let's open this up again, and we'll copy this guy. We have our module loaders, and I've actually changed my style where instead of just specifying a loader as a string, I like to specify loaders as an array of strings. Makes it a little easier. So yeah, there is that. And now we should be good to build. And we also, looks like we need our CSS loader. So we will this guy. Oops. Okay. And this will be, last will be the style, and first will be the CSS. This will be all files ending in CSS. Oh, it's filled. And that is not working. Oh, because we're ignoring node modules. We don't want to do that. We're loading serialize. Oh gosh. Now we need the raw loader. I think. Hold on a second. Yeah. Gosh, this is dumb. Sorry I didn't have this. I really wish that I'd like saved my state where I was. So I'm gonna pull up my work project just so I don't have to
copy everything.
Make sure that I get the syntax right.
I think you're missing the loaders for the TTF files and like all these font files that are included in that CSS.
Yeah, so I'm gonna add those. And that should do it, and I'm pretty sure we do have the file loader already installed.
Yep.
There it is. Okay, so now if we build, it works. Yay, there we go. So we've got our dist directory, we have our bundle, we have the res, and so let's just see WebStorm's hosting our files at some crazy port, and so we'll just open up that. Yay, there we go. Every time we refresh. Sweet, okay. So now let's see if we can get the test up and running. I'm gonna go ahead and commit this. I'm going to actually ignore the dist directory because you don't want to generate files. And actually, I'm going to leave the master branch at as the starting point. So actually, yeah. I'm trying to decide if I really want it to be the starting point. or the finishing point. So I'm actually going to check out new branch. It'll be steps/0, and we'll check out master again, and we'll commit our changes. Back, and then we'll check out a new branch step 1. And we'll go back to master, and master. I'll just push everything right now. 0, 1, steps. That failed. Here, what was that branch I just made? Oh, step 1. But now I'm all confused. I don't know what branches had. I call it step 0. Yeah, steps 0, and then I called the other one step 1. Whoops. Out steps 1. Steps. Step 1. And we'll go ahead and push those guys. Okay, great. So now let's get the test working. So if I run npm test, I'm gonna fail because I think karma. Yeah, karma is actually a reference. Oh, that is correct. This is using tools here, which is now a path here. And yeah, so there are a couple of things in here that we are going to alter. We have this get test webpack config. And this, let's see, I just barely did it. I feel like I did another project recently that I kind of changed things up a bit on how I actually generate the webpack configuration for tests. So let me, I don't think it was that long ago. Maybe it was Invoke Filter. Yeah. Okay, so I have this Invoke Filter project, which is actually pretty cool. Do you do Angular?
Yeah, I do.
Sweet. So yeah, this is actually kind of neat. Except it's not rendering for some reason. That's odd. Well, basically this Invoke Filter, what it does is it allows you to invoke a function that's on your controller, but invoke it via a filter. And the reason that's cool is because Angular considers filters to be stateless, and so it won't rerun your function to check for changes unless the arguments have changed. So it performs a little bit better. So anyway, that's what this invoke filter is all about. And so I'm going to borrow some of the ideas from invoke filter. Wow, there's a lot more stuff in here than I just want to copy paste. Because I'd actually like to demonstrate how it really works. So let's go ahead and we'll go to our webpack config. And the idea is we're going to have a slightly different configuration when we're in when the node environment is test. So let's see. Say get config, and we'll have a function get config, and we'll return config, and right here we'll say var config equals. Okay, so let me just review this really quick. So we're going to have our context. Our context equals process.env.node.env, and we'll default to development. And oh, okay, I see what I'm doing. Yeah, I forget, and I spelled the wrong development. So we'll say var config functions. I really like this method. This will work nicely. So we're gonna skip development. Well, yeah, we'll just do development. We won't do. We'll do a production. We won't do a development. Production prod config and test get test config. And then down here we'll have prod config and test config. And then we're going to our config equals, well, we'll just do basically all the same stuff. Okay. And add common plugins, we'll just grab that too. We actually, I don't think we need those plugins, so we'll skip that. Package JSON, I don't think that we really care to have the version on this one either. So we'll skip the version. Building in context mode. Okay. So for our test config, well, you know what? I am just going to copy this whole stinking thing, and I'll remove the stuff that we don't need and just what's going on. Does that sound all right to you?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. Is this kind of hard to follow? Normally with my egghead lessons, I have time to like go through stuff like this.
No, I follow you. And actually before that, I was also digging deep into the KDCT command tools or something like that. And I tried to like figure out how this whole thing is running. And yeah, I put the code underscore coverage equals true into package JSON. So that enabled actually the code coverage.
Yeah. So, and I need to work on KCD common tools a little bit because the implementation isn't terrific. Like I modify the config in here, which I don't do an invoke filter because it's a lot cleaner this way. So hopefully this makes sense. So I'm going to get rid of some of this. Well, what the heck, I'll install this as a dev dependency. It's kind of nice. So Webpack notifier just pops up a little notification at the top when your build passes, and if your build fails, and then after your build passes after a failure. So it's kind of handy. So I'm gonna skip out. Well, we'll leave the package JSON in there. We'll leave the version in there. We don't really need this like to specify the version on a like a project, but open source project is kind of handy. And so then most of our stuff will exclude the node modules. So I just have that regex here once. Yeah, just so I don't have to repeat myself, I guess. I don't know. It's really not saving much. But then we have our development configuration. And so this specifies our context. That is still accurate. Our context is still in the source, and our entry is still in index.js. Our output, we're not going to do package.json main. This will be bundle.js. And path will be here in dist. And it's not a library, so we'll get rid of that. Stats we can leave. Plugins, we don't have any plugins for our dev config, so we just make an empty array. I don't think we actually need the resolve here at all, but I'll just leave that. And then here's where some of the magic comes with the test mode. So we get our JavaScript loaders, and so if the context has an index of test that's not -1. So context can be test or test CI, which may or may not be useful depending on your use case. You may just be fine with test. But yeah, so if we don't have, if we're not in test mode and we're not trying to do code coverage,
maybe you want to give a different config for the loader, right?
That's right. Yep. So
and the context that's coming from a node environment, as I've seen it
yep.
at the top.
Yep, exactly. So anything that ends in JS, we're just going to load through ESLint for our linting, Babel, and then ng-annotate. And that's pretty much how it works for our production version as well. And then we'll exclude our node modules. However, if we are doing test and code coverage, then we'll return 2 loaders instead for our JavaScript loaders. And actually, this isn't going to work for our project because we also need CSS loaders and stuff. So we'll bring that. We'll do something about that here in a little bit. But we are going to include only mock and test files, so only if it ends in .test and .mock. And then for this, we're going to actually change the configuration for our ESLint to be ESLint-RC for our tests. So like that adds globals for describe and it and everything else that we need for our Mocha stuff. So I'll probably have to bring something like that in. Actually, I'll do that right now. We'll go to the project that I got this from and just copy same stuff. Okay, we'll get this guy. And just scroll this into other. So then, and yeah, I guess that'll work. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, so yeah, for our test files, we have our specific ESLint file, and that's pretty much the only difference. But then this is where coverage comes in for our regular JavaScript files. When we're in test mode, instead of loading it through the Babel plugin, we're going to load it through Esparta, and we do that after ng-annotate. Actually, this to me is a little bit magical because I feel like I should have to load it through Babel first before ng-annotate, because ng-annotate can't quite take ES6 very well. I think you have to do a flag. So I'm not totally sure. I'll be totally honest. I'm not totally sure how this works, but it does. And the reason that you need to make sure that you don't load it through Babel first or at all is because Esparta actually will load it through Babel, but it only does that after it instruments your code for coverage. So it will first instrument your code for coverage and then load it through Babel. I think that's kind of how it works. So anyway, and then we're going to exclude not only our node modules, but also anything with test and mock, so that we're not recording coverage for test and mock files. And that
probably it's also a good idea. Sorry, it's just like it's probably also a good idea to add there like power modules if like somebody else is using also npm and power at the same time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So if and then also like in my project, I actually like there are some things that I commit directly to source because they aren't distributed on any sort of distribution registry. And so for those, I put them in a folder called non-node modules, which this actually matches as well. But it kind of is like, this should be a node module, but it's not. And so that's where this goes. But yeah. So that is just for our JavaScript loaders. I'll add the other loaders that we need here in a little bit. We're not going to need externals because our project will ship with Angular, and ESLint configuration is fine. And then if we're not on continuous integration, then we're going to just add the Webpack notifier plugin so that we get the little pop-up up here. So that is our dev configuration. For our prod config, actually, let's go ahead and I'll just make the dev config work first. So if we go to, let me just look at, I'm trying to find here. I'm just going to go back to steps 1. Look at the Webpack config that we had before, and we'll just bring these two in. So I'm also going to, we have Lodash in here. So I'm going to stick this through flatten. Actually, we'll just union. And those two together. So this function returns an array. We have this other array. We're going to join those two together. So now we still have our CSS loader and stuff. I think that actually should work for the dev case. So if we go back to our package.json, I am going to bring back our dev build. Do production. Hold on, no. We'll just use the development with our start. And that's using Webpack dev server. We're going to get rid of this config. And everything else should be good. So if we run npm start, and we're going to blow up because we don't have ng annotate in this project. And I can't remember, this isn't actually an Angular project, so we don't need that. So I'll get rid of ng annotate here, and here, and here. Do that over again. Great, and now if we go to localhost 80, there we go. And okay, so yeah, I'm going to go ahead and commit this. Everything. This is not going to be a very useful commit history. I've got tons of other stuff, but commit stuff working, and check out a new branch called step. It is steps 2, and push you in steps 2. And go ahead and push transfer. Okay. Great. So then let's get our production config working. So we're going to just get the dev config, and we're going to merge that with some overrides. So we'll have our output is now not going to be this. Our output, let's see, what is our output in the dev config? Yeah, it's in the dist. Oh, actually, oh, that doesn't really make a difference here. We don't need the output here for the dev config because it's being served up by our
the Webpack server,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll just stick that here. And then our dev tool will now be source map rather than eval, which I think it is, or it should be up here. It's not. We'll add it. All right, libraries and projects are a little bit different. Whereas in a library, you wouldn't want to have a dev tool for your dev config where it's like the unminified version of your library. In a project, you definitely want to have it, and we'll use eval. And that is because it compiles fast and recompiles fast. But it's not a very good thing for actual like production use. But source map is, so we'll use source map, and for production, we don't want the build to pass if there's an ESLint error, or yeah. Whereas in development, it's okay for our stuff to pass because like we're developing, sometimes we're going to make mistakes. We'll put a debugger in there or something. We want it to actually build and be able to test it out, but we don't want it to succeed when we're building for prod. So that's what that is for. And then we're going to add our plugins. Oh yeah, so there's some wonkiness with uglification when we're doing test. So for the test CI, we actually get the prod config and we say don't uglify it. And I can't remember exactly what the problem was there, but that you can experiment with that. Yeah, there was something wonky. So basically what we do is we still want to test that, like our uglified version. Maybe this isn't as important in a non-Angular project, but in an Angular project, it's very important to make sure that your uglified version still works because the annotations and stuff. And so that's why for the test CI stuff, I like to test it as it's uglified. And so because of some weird issue that I found with uglification during testing, I load it through the uglify loader, which doesn't really work well for like actual production use, but it actually uglifies your code and everything, so it works fine for our testing. So does that make sense? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think in like any project, you want to like test the final bundle package. I mean, like if that's going into production, then probably it makes more sense to test that one.
Yeah, and so like definitely for like if you have end-to-end tests and stuff, you're going to want to make sure that what you're testing is actually exactly what you're sending out to production. For unit tests, it's maybe a little less important, but probably still valuable. So okay, so yeah, that's what this no uglify thing is all about. So yeah, all that we change about our prod config is that it does have an output. We changed the dev tool, and then we have ESLint. So if we go ahead and run npm run build, and we should get, and it's uglifying, and so that's why it takes quite a bit longer. There we go. So now we have our bundle, and it's minified. And if we open up this guy, Storm, then everything still works. Great. One thing to note, I don't know if Webpack has something to do, or like, I'm sure that there's a plugin or something for Webpack to do this for you, but you'll want to make sure you gzip this. And I use something called Zopfli. I'm not sure if that's what it's really called, but it's Zopfli, I think, actually. npm. Open up an npm module from the command line, but it's Zopfli, I think. Nope, that is not it at all. Gzip. Oh. Like that. Maybe that's not what it's called on. This is it. I can't remember what it's called on npm. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, so it's 5% better than gzip, and actually that held true in my project, so I recommend it. It takes about 100 times longer, but it's not like, it doesn't take all that long anyway, so you just wouldn't want to do this like on the fly.
Okay. So then, even though like gzip is enabled on the server, you do this.
Yep. Yeah. So it actually behaves the same way, and the browser will decompress it. It's just, I guess, a better compression algorithm. So, but yeah, you'll definitely want to do that when you shift to production because you cut down a lot by gzipping. Okay, cool. So that is
just maybe something there. I also have some experience on that, and I was thinking like if you have like Angular and underscore and other libraries that are probably not going to ever change, but like you have like different routes in your project, maybe it also makes sense to create like multiple entries in your webpack config, so you can like separate your actual application logic into a separate file from the libraries or vendors.
Yeah.
Because then
Totally.
the browser can cache the not changing vendors JS, but like when you are doing the development on your application, then the application file probably going to change.
Yeah.
And then the browser will only need to reload like one smaller portion instead of the whole chunk.
Yeah, totally. Highly recommended. And one thing that I do in my app is I decided to, and I should actually probably split up some stuff into vendor files, but what I do is instead I I add it as an external, and so you can have your externals here. Whoops. And list some like third-party stuff that like should be loaded by some other mechanism. And let's see, I think I've actually, don't I have that? No, I don't. So in my project, I have a list of things that I want to have on a CDN. And so locally, I load them and they're packaged with my bundle. But then when I deploy, I add them as externals, and then I put the CDN URLs in my index.html, which is generated from a Jade template, a very simple Jade template. And so then I offload that to the CDN. It's a little bit dangerous to do that because then you're kind of dependent on the CDN being up, but it's worked out pretty okay so far. So, but yeah, that's a good tip. Okay, so let me go ahead and get this production working, and we'll check out so steps 3 and master. Oops. And steps 3. Making sure that I do that so I don't forget like I did last time. Let's see. So then let's get to our tests. We'll get our tests up and running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to this guy, and we'll go to our Karma config here. And I'm just going to curl this. Okay, GitHub. Yep. Oh. Okay. Instead, I will copy this to our Karma, and I'm just going to paste this all over. Okay, so this is how our Karma works. So when we run npm test, it sets the node environment to test, and then it says Karma start. Karma will read our exports from our Karma conf and invoke it with this config function, or this config object that has a set that what's this for? It just has this set, and you pass in the configuration. So lots of this stuff is, or some of this stuff is default, like base path. In our project, we don't need Angular stuff, so we can get rid of those things. And these are only necessary because in Invoke Filter, Angular was listed as an external, and so we needed to load it some other way. And then Angular mocks is something specific for testing. So then we have our entry, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have some preprocessors that I'll talk about, and our reporters, Webpack config. This is to reduce the amount of output you get when you're running your tests, which is actually quite helpful. So you don't get like any Webpack, like I built this thing and we say, we don't care, we just want to see our output. And then for our coverage configuration, and then some other extra pretty normal config. So let's go back up to the top here. And what we're doing is we determine whether we're in coverage mode, and we determine also if we're running in CI mode. And then if we are in coverage mode, we simply log that out. And then we get our Webpack config. We identify the entry file because this is what we're going to be loading into Karma. And then Karma will run the Webpack preprocessor for the entry file. And so then we use our Webpack config to process this entry file, which ultimately is going to result in this index.txt file. So we'll look how that actually happens here in a second.
Is there any reason you like put that into a separate variable? Because as I can see, like preprocessors is just an array of one item, which is the Webpack. And I mean, for me, that's kind of like confusing.
Well,
and probably you won't really need any other preprocessors.
Sorry, what was that?
So like, is there any reason you put like the preprocessors into a separate variable?
Oh, why I put preprocessors like just initializing?
Yeah, instead of putting that right into the config.sat.
Yeah, so the reason for that is because I'm not doing ES6 here, and so if I were doing ES6, then what I would do is I would just say entry is Webpack, but yeah, my browser or my editor thinks that this is ES6, but this isn't actually being run in ES6, so this is actually not valid in ES5.
Yeah.
And so yeah, this is why we love ES6. And also, if I were running ES6, I could do that. But yeah, it's actually pretty easy, I think, to set up Karma, the Karma config to run in ES6. I'm pretty sure that all I would need to do is say require babel/register, I think. And I think that would do it, but I've never done that before. I should, because like it kills me to write in ES5. But yeah, so actually let's jump into our Webpack config and see what it does for when we're in test mode. So we've got our context, and in our case, this will be test now. And so when we get our config function with the context, it's going to be this one. And so what we're going to do is we'll get our dev config, and we will override the entry to simply be test. And we'll override the plugins for really no reason at all. There isn't a reason that we need to override the plugins in this case. Oh, let's just get rid of that. So yeah, all we really care about is to override the entry, and then we'll return that as our Webpack config. And maybe there's a little bit of a separation of concerns. This is probably a better place for us to determine what our JavaScript loaders should be, rather than having this crazy if statement that's like, wait, I thought I was getting my dev config, now you're talking about tests. This would probably be best handled inside of our get test config to override the loaders or something. So yeah, that can be worksmithed. Absolutely. But yeah, so ultimately we get our entry file. We tell Karma to process the entry file through the Webpack plugin, and then we pass our Webpack configuration that has all of our loaders and everything, including the Asparta stuff, to our Karma config, and then also reporters will default to progress, but if we're in coverage mode, we're going to also push the coverage reporter. on to our reporters. And I think that should work. Let's just see if it does. npm test. And it totally blows up because we don't have sign on shy. I don't think we need it, so I'm just going to get rid of this. And get rid of this. But if you had that, you would obviously want to keep those and install those dependencies. We need karma coverage, so I should install that. Install coverage. There was another error as well. Source index.test.js. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see what we see here. Cannot find ESLint plugin Mocha. Well, goodness gracious, I'll just install that. Okay. Now we'll get back to our real problem. We cannot resolve module Isparta. Okay, so we'll install Isparta and the Isparta loader. I think actually, not sure, but Isparta may list Istanbul as a pure dependency. So for anybody who may be watching and anybody who doesn't know, Isparta is actually just a wrapper tool that combines Babel, our transpiler, our ES6 transpiler, and Istanbul, which is the de facto standard for instrumenting your code for code coverage. And so Isparta just kind of joins the two. And I think there's an effort to make Istanbul just work with ES6 better, but I don't think that's actually happened yet. So.
But then if I get you correctly, then if I'm not using ES6, then I won't even need Isparta.
That's correct. Yep.
The key point there is just to provide a different setup, different like Webpack setup for the test and for the actual build.
Yeah, that's the key. And if you're not using ES6, you'll use the Istanbul and Istanbul loader. But if you are using Webpack, then there's no reason to not use ES6 because it's so, like all it is a loader at Babel. So let's see, right there. That's all it takes, and then you're suddenly using ES6, and it's a glorious thing.
And then for the test, you modified the entry point. Right, that was the key there.
Yep, that's the other key. You modify the entry point to be your test stuff. So one other thing to note in my projects, not my open source projects, but in my other
actual
like work
paying.
projects, yeah, in my bread and butter project, like you wind up with a lot of files throughout your whole file system, and I prefer to actually require my test in the unit that's being tested. So I'll do something like this. At user card. And so like there's some stuff that you have to do to make it so Webpack recognizes process env, node env. And then Webpack is smart enough that if this evaluates to test, then it'll say, okay, I can require this. But if it evaluates to something like production, then this will evaluate to false, and Webpack will just get rid of that. So like your test will never be required in production or anything. Yeah, so that's what I really like to do, and my egghead lesson instructs in that way. And it's just really beneficial because that way, in like a big project, if I decide, hey, I need to move these files somewhere else, you don't need to, like, you just move them together. And it it makes it so when you're developing, you look at your, like you're coding up and you're like, oh yeah, there's the test file, it's right there. I should write tests for this. So there are some benefits to doing things that way, but some people really throw up in their mouths when they see test related stuff in your components. But Yeah, so in my projects, I still do have an index.test because there's some additional things that I want to load, like I want to initialize chai and whatever. But then from there, I have an index.common that both the index and index.test will require to get all of the files for the project. And so like this, like there's pretty much nothing in this index.js that I don't also, like in that scenario, I wouldn't also want in my index.test. So I'd probably be fine just to say like import index tests or import index, whatever. And in this very small project, if I were requiring my tests from my components, then I could actually use the same entry file and that would work fine. So that's just special because this is a very small project. But yeah, do you have any questions about that or why I do that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. So far, the key points are that you need to modify your entry.js, or not the entry.js, or the entry for your Webpack, and then you and that entry will be like your main .test.js or whatever, and that one will like the .test.js will require the actual code. So I guess or not. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And I guess then this way you can make sure that the real code is there, so the code coverage can see like the actual code and test the coverage, right?
yeah. So in this scenario, I think I may have made it a little confusing because I kind of started rambling off on how I do things in my own project. There are several ways to do this, but at the end of the day, what you need to do is you make sure that your dependency tree includes everything that you need. So in this very small application, we're importing the tests totally separate from the rest of the application. And then the test files will actually import the components themselves. And so the dependency tree includes all of the files that we need for both our testing and our actual project.
And the code coverage will have a way like this way to also do the comparison.
Yeah, so yeah, the code coverage won't cover this because as part of my loaders, I've specified that we're going to, as part of my test, so the regex here is only going to include the test and the mock files. And then as my exclude for what I'm loading through the Sparta, which is responsible for doing the code coverage, I'm excluding the test and the mock. So yeah, that's how like those are kind of the key takeaways. And then in your Karma config, you need to make sure you have the right reporters. So you have a coverage reporter, and so you need the Karma coverage plugin. And then you can configure that reporter via this property here. And then you need to also make sure that you're loading the entry file, and then you're pre-processing that entry file with Webpack as part of your preprocessors. And then you also pass your Webpack config so that the Karma Webpack plugin knows what to do with those files, what loaders to apply. And then as just kind of a help, I specify the no info on the Webpack middleware so it doesn't spit out this garbage every single time it rebuilds. So it looks like all that we have is just a couple of ESLint problems, which are fine for now. The tests are working. So yeah, any other questions? I think I'll just go ahead and fix those ESLint problems now. If you have any questions, shoot them out. Okay, sweet. And so that, yeah, there's if I So we get it running again every single time we save a file, and yeah, so everything's like ready to be tested and covered. So now actually, let's see, why is coverage not actually happening? Here, let me commit where we're at, and then we can figure that out. Okay. So, yeah, let's figure out what's going on here with our coverage.
Probably
oh, you know
want
what?
to set the coverage to true.
Yeah. Yep, you got it. Run npm test. It says it's recording coverage, and it should actually report coverage as well. So coverage summary, if we look in our project, we have this coverage folder, and we can open up index.html and open in the browser. And we see we have pretty poor code coverage. But if let's go ahead and I'll add some coverage to the get user card. So there's a big difference between covered code and well-tested code. I'm going to show an example of highly covered code that's poorly tested. So we'll say get user card from, and we'll say expect user card invoked to be so way up, and now we have 100% coverage, but this is totally a worthless test. It's not testing anything at all. But yeah, so that's kind of the workflow. You have your coverage going. You make a change, you see your coverage go up. You go into here and you see, okay, this is what I've got. And so, like, for example, in random user, you could come in here and say, oh, I need to call the function, and like these are the lines that I'm not actually covering right now, so I should probably cover those. So yep, that's pretty much it. Now you have code coverage going. So do you have any other questions? I'll go ahead and commit this.
No, I don't think so. I mean, really, so in my project that I'm like trying to set up, I'm using ES5, but actually, like, I mean, I'm using ES5 syntax, but ES6 is enabled. I'm using double as well, and I'm using actually poor Istanbul. So I don't really need eSparta.
Yeah.
I think there it's just like, for me, it was confusing a bit. Like, so I mean, they're running, the coverage is running. It's just like always shows 100%, and where I could like get is that from Stack Overflow and yeah, from the internet is like probably my Webpack is actually not including the actual code itself, so there is no possibility for the coverage to compare against.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, actually, I'm kind of curious, is there a reason that you don't just use ES6?
Yeah, the reason for that is like I haven't really checked out yet the syntax, and I'm working together with other people in the project, and yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes
well, you could just turn it on; they wouldn't even notice.
I mean, it's turned on right now. It's just like I don't really want to go right now into like mixing the two syntax up. and like having it this way or having it that way. Once the project gets into like a stable phase, then it's going to be a good idea to move forward to ES6.
Cool. Sweet. Well, do you think that from what we've gone through, you'll be able to figure out what problems you've had?
Yeah, I think so. Probably I will figure out. I mean, like if you could push the changes that you did there, and then I can look it up and even clone the repository and play with that separately.
Yeah, so it should be up right now. The latest stuff is in the master branch, and then you have the steps, which is basically just the commits. So yeah, it should be everything that you need.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Lovely session.
Yeah. Well, see you later.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.